Hey peeps, welcome back to my channel. This is the first video out of multiple videos covering UITableView not only in depth, but hopefully once and for all. Now, this video right here will include how to build from scratch our UITableView and populate it with data that we are having locally available. And the second video will be actually fetching data from an API and populate our table with that. The third will include how to build a custom table view cell, so we can have something fancy like a count in front of an image and a label and a smaller label. And you could even do more fancier stuff just once you've learned how to do a custom table view cell. The fourth video, or the video after that, will include how to dynamically or actually asynchronously load images and also cache them. It's not complicated, believe me, it's simple once we get to that. So loading images for each table view cell and then also cache them. So we once scroll up again, we have them. Okay, they weren't loaded. We have them immediately. That is a later video. After the fetching image video, we will have swipe actions. So leading swipe, counting up how many amiibos we own already, and then also a trailing swipe to delete an amiibo. And then the last video will be about a detail view to display a larger image of the amiibo we have selected from our table view. And if you have anything that comes to your mind that you are missing, don't hesitate to always comment down below. Let's start right now with implementing from scratch our first table view. As always, we will create a new Xcode project, call it Tableview for my case, call it whatever you want it in your case, saving it on the desktop, aligning it better. Yeah. All right. And then the first thing, we will delete the main storyboard and then also remove the reference right here, Command-Shift-K to clean the project, to delete potential references that are being cached, deleting all the functions we don't use and need, implementing our UI window. If you want to learn that and you haven't yet, there's a video in the description just explaining more detail what I'm doing here right now. It's the former video that I've made. And then window root view controller, right, is equal to, and we will not use that one, we will define our own one. We want a UI view controller that lists all the amiibos we have, right? Why don't we just call it amiibo list view controller, shortening the view controller term to VC, and then also calling that one amiibo list view controller and assigning that as a root view controller, having our window visible and being the key window. And if we start that up right now, we will see a black screen and that everything works and we are good to go. Now let's do the first thing. Let's have the first thing that we do be the background set to white, so we can work something nicer. And from here, we will have to add our table view, which is just a UI view. And we have worked with UI view before, right? So how do we actually add them to our views? How do we constrain them to our views? There's nothing special about that. The special thing comes later. So basically, if that class gets initiated, it will have a local property called Tableview. And when we actually load that view, we want to call a setup view functions that we haven't defined yet. Let's define that as well. Setup view functions, just to separate our concerns. So this will just set up the whole view of that controller. Yes, it is complaining, but now it's gone. And what we are doing here is, first thing is we're adding UITableView as a subview. And I haven't mentioned that or pointed that out before, but if you are starting adding constraints to a UI view that you want to add as a subview, you have to add that view first. So that's why I do that here. Always add the UI view first before setting constraints, right? That's very important. It won't work the other way around. I can show you in a second. So let's just, as always, translates auto resizing mask into constraints is equal to false. I've explained that in the first video as well. If you've missed that, link is in the description. All right, how do we want to actually lay out our table view? I would like to have it basically from left to right full screen, from bottom full screen, and at the top everything but the status bar, right? So, but the status bar, right? So we have to define a safe area as well, which is of type UI layout guide. Covered that in the first video as well. And if the view.load gets called, we are assigning from the views layout margins guide that value to our safe area, so we can work with that. So we can have table view top constraint, top anchor constraint to the safe areas top anchor is active equals true. And now that table view will be constrained right underneath that notch. Perfect. We will see that in a second. So, and then the leading anchor will be constrained to the view's leading anchor. So on the very left is active equals true, and table view bottom anchor will be constrained to the view's bottom anchor. I use the bottom anchor of the view and not the safe area because I don't mind having the table view scroll underneath that bar right here. If you mind, just use the safe view area. Have table view trailing anchor constraint to the view's trailing anchor is active equals true. Now that setup function gets called right here. Cannot assign because it's let. Let's change that one into a var. And if we run that, we should see a table view. It's that simple. We just added a table view to our app. Look at that. How beautiful is that? Now, this table view, don't get confused. It shows some lines seemingly having rows. That's not rows. That's just some, just some beautiful grid that is showing. Basically, you can just start working with that here. The next thing we want to do is populate that with data. Now, how do we do that? So the table view itself has a property that is called Datasource, where it will know where to get the data from. Not only how many rows do I have, but also for each row, how to get a table view cell to then be displayed for each row. So let's have a look. Table view data source, that is a property, and we have to assign a data source to that. We can do that as simple as using our class itself, having it conform to, and let's just start using commands to mark our sections in our code with that syntax. That basically allows us up here to separate with that line our code in different areas. You see setup view, right? And then setup view as a function. And then if we have down here, for example, mark colon dash, and then we say UITableView data source, we will start seeing that up here. And that line is actually defined by that dash. If we remove that dash, we won't see that line. And if we just use the dash but no colon, we won't see anything, but just our functions, everything. So it's not very well structured. So if we use that, we will have a structured way of jumping to our code, right? Okay, down here, we will extend our Amiibo list view controller and have it conform to UITableView data source. By conforming to that protocol, we are forced to implement two functions. If we hit Command Enter, Xcode will help us filling our our extension with these both functions without the implementation. We will do that in a second. But basically, why these functions are needed is if we now say, hey, in the view.load, right? Once we load the view, let's also set for the table view its data source, which is self, like our instance self itself is the data source. So now what Tableview does is once it's loaded the first time in our app, it's loaded the first time in our app, it will go to its data source property, and then if it's not nil, it will call all the functions that data source protocol is actually defining. If we jump in here, we will see a lot of functions, not only like the both we have just filled in our extension, but more than that. But these both are minimum. And so it will call all these functions and work with that. And for example, it will call this function first before calling that one. It will ask, hey, Tableview, like the table views, right? It's loaded, and then it will say, hey, data source, how many rows do I actually have? Like, give me a number, right? And then we will say, okay, well, you have 7 rows. Go with that. And then it will say, okay, thanks, 7 rows, good to know. Next, hey, then here's the next function. I'm right now at my first row, index 0, let's say, because it will go through the number, right? 7, it will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, starting at 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for each number, it will call that function down here and say, hey, I'm at this index path right now. So in the first row, it will say, hey, I'm at index path 0, give me a cell. Like, do you have a cell for me? UITableView cell, give me. And then that function will actually say, well, okay, I don't care about the index path right now. I'll just return a Tableview cell. That's basically it. And then it will call that function 7 times. Once that is done, and all the other functions that we didn't use here right now are called as well at some point, it will load the table view and then just display everything it knows about it. So if we right now run the app, we won't see anything because the table view cell is empty. Like, there is a cell, there are 7 cells in fact, but we don't see a color, background color, we don't see a label whatsoever. We can change that, right? So we can have UITableView cell down here. Let's assign it first to a variable, right? Let's do that. And then say, hey, and every UITableView cell is having default properties. So it helps already with some things we can use. So it has, for example, it has an image view, it has a text label, a detailed text label, sort of already the things that you've seen in my final app that I demonstrated. And yeah, we can use these things, and depending, well, I won't get into more detail because we will use the custom cell later on, but for now we definitely can access the text label and say text is equal to, hey, listen, like that, and then return that cell. If we hit run, we will see a table view populated with 7 rows with 7 cells all saying, hey, listen. And so right now it works. Right now we have populated data into our table view cell. Right now it's quite static as well, right? We have a static number right here that doesn't really change. And we have also for each cell the value assigned, hey, listen. We want to have that dynamic based on the data that we actually want to use. Before we do that, you will have to know about what we are doing right here. Let's say we have 7, we have told the table view, yeah, you have 7 rows, right? So we will have 7 instances, right? Instances of UITableView cell. 7 instances is not much. That's good to handle for like a memory, in regards of memory. But let's say we have 70. That's quite a huge number already. If we run that, we have 70 times that function calls, returning 70 different and unique UITableView cells, right? And we can scroll through all that, and it's 70 cells. And what you actually see right here is only about 30 cells at once, right? and then like 40 cells, like 20 above, 20 beneath, are not visible, but still there in memory, being like allocated and used, whatever. And that is not very performant. There is a solution to that, and that's why I'm pointing it out. It would be awesome if we could, for example, reuse cells. Like once that cell gets out of the view, right? Then before another cell gets into the view, why don't we just reuse that cell and just populate it with new data, right? And just have about 30 instances running, and then just like whenever you scroll up, it will just like be reused, or scroll down, it will be reused as well once it gets out of the view. And so that's how it works, how it is implemented to be very performant. How do we do that? Very simple. Long story short, there is a function called but on Tableview, because Tableview is having all these cells, and then you say DQ reusable cell with identifier add index or for index, and then you will have to provide an identifier and then provide the index path that you get passed in anyway. So you use that. So you basically tell Tableview, hey, give me a cell with that identifier. We will get to that in a second. Give me a cell for that index row. Do you have a Tableview cell? And then it will just it will say, yes, I have, like starting from 0. We don't, like the first time a Tableview gets loaded, it won't have any Tableview cells instances, right? It will say, well, I don't have a reusable cell. Here's a new one. Here's a new one of type UITableView cell. And then we'll do that 30 times because we have only about 30 visible, but it won't do that for all the others that are out of the view, because we only see these. Once we start scrolling, it will then start asking again, hey, do you have a Tableview cell for me that I can use for the 31 row right now, because I'm just like having it coming into the view. And then it would say, well, let me look. And then it has like the first row that is out of the view, like flying around, not being used, and say, yes, well, I have it. Have a UITableView cell, here you go. So that's basically what we do right at this line. This happens all at this line. And the cell ID, basically, we have to use that in order to use that function DQ reusable cell. So to use that performance boost, so to say. And that is actually registering a cell that this function knows to look for. Now, it's not registering, it is looking for a cell that is registered by that ID. Now, where is it registered? Nowhere. We haven't done that yet. So that's something we have to do as well. So before on view.load, we will have Tableview register the register cell class for reuse identifier. Let's do it once again. Register, and then we say UITableView cell self. So please register that cell for the identifier cell ID. Right? Let's do it all lowercase. So we register that Tableview cell for that ID, and once that function calls, hey, is there a Tableview cell flying around with that ID? Then it will see, okay, there is one flying around right now, not used. Return that right here, assign it with, we will populate that cell with data right at this line and return it again. So if we run that, that should just work fine, and we won't see any difference right now. Not now, not yet. Everything will just work fine. Now, let's change having every cell saying, hey, listen, let's change having a static 17 number being set for the row. How do we do that? Let's define a local property saying amiibo list, including all the amiibo, let's say just names for now. So Zelda, Link, Navi, and Ganondorf. Let's have a local, and then say down here, well, when it gets asked, how many rows do you have? 1 sec. You have 4 rows, right? Because we have 4 names. It would say 4 names, and then the table view would say, okay, now let's call this function 4 times, and then say, hey, give me a cell for the index path 0, and you would say, okay, cool, I will do that. Giving a new instance because we don't have anything out of the view right now, and then what we do here right now is, have you noticed that I said index path 0? It starts at 0. What is that? It's basically can be used as the index of our array. So we have 4 elements in our array. It will call this function 4 times, starting at 0, and then pass that index path in as well. So we can actually assign our name, not assign, but access our name by saying amiibo list, and then not index path, because index path is of type index path, but it has a row, so an integer representing the index basically, and say this is 0 the first time, 1 the second time, 2 the third time, and 3 the fourth time. And so we have then Zelda, Link, Navi, and Ganondorf every time assigned here, and then we just say, well, the text label should be equal to the name. Let's run that and let's see. We should have our table view populated by just 4 rows with 4 cells, all including the names of that array. And that's basically how you easily not only create your own table view cell and constrain it to your view, to your likings, but also populate it with local data you have, and then also define the data source. And you also understand how the reusable table view cell hopefully works underneath and why and what it's good for. If you like these kind of videos, let me know by hitting the like button. Also, feel free to always comment what you liked, what you disliked, what topic you would like to see next, and hit subscribe if you want not to miss out the new upcoming videos regarding UITableView and also all the other videos that I have planned in the future. In the description box, you will find a link to Patreon where you can download every source code from every video if you select the right tier. I'm using Patreon because I want to do that full time. I really want to do multiple videos a week, and in order to be able to do that, I have to start generating some sort of income. But all on the basis of, if you want to, right? Not forced. I will just still continue. I will somehow figure it out, but I'm mentioning it here. Also, there's a link in the description about my Instagram. Come on over. I'm very active on Instagram. I'm very also accessible. You can just write me a DM as well as comment here. I will always answer every single DM or comment. It's possible yet. On Instagram at least. It gets harder every day, but I still manage that for some reason. And I hope you like it. See you in the next video. Bye.